Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJ Muir. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
Stewart, we have a number of topics to hit today. The first one, electric vehicles. Are they really a bargain? Because they hardly cost anything to fuel up right now.
Well, I love talking about electric cars because I know everyone's interested in it, and most people have got a really firm point of view. Some people love EVs, some people hate EVs, some people just want more information. I'm a little more in the third category. I'm just trying to figure out EVs because there's so much information. It seems to be changing and evolving rapidly. So I think you've got to be, if you want to have a good opinion, a valid opinion in this, you need to be paying attention to what's going on. And here's something that just happened that might revise some people's view of EVs. So Norway last year, they reached what some say is a tipping point of electric vehicle adoption. 54% of the new cars bought by Norwegians were electric cars. And that's driven in large part by government policy because the Norwegian government gives people an enormous subsidy to buy an EV.
Which is kind of ironic considering Norway's biggest moneymaker is crude oil exports.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly heard it said that this policy for electric vehicles is a little bit their way to say to the world, hey, yeah, we're doing this over here. We're a big oil and gas producer. That's why we're such a wealthy country. But we're also doing this over here to mitigate the effects of it. So, give us a little credit for that. And I think they are getting some credit for it. But the fact remains that the Norwegian economic phenomenon of our times is largely driven by oil and gas. And that will be so in the future, too.
Sure. And Norwegians enjoy over $1 million a person per saving because the oil and gas revenues go into their pension fund, which is kind of nice as well. But how big a subsidy do they get for an electric car in Norway?
Significant enough that if you're just an average Norwegian and you're looking at your transportation options, you're going to buy an EV because it's just a no-brainer. They make it so cheap to buy. The problem, however, is that Norwegians, in the way they live, they're spread around a relatively large area. There's not a big population. There's only 5 million, and they're needing to use their road network to get around. And so what's happening is people will buy that EV because you'd be crazy not to at the price they're offered at. But then they use that to get around town to do the grocery shopping and take the kids to school and stuff. And then when they need to drop to Oslo or whatever they're doing long distance, they take their gas or diesel burning car and do that. So that's probably changing over time with the level of adoption we're seeing. But I think in terms of the average Norwegian, it hasn't necessarily revolutionized how they travel.
Now, in Canada, a spread out country, is it still easy or not easy if you have an electric car to charge it as you drive from Vancouver to Toronto?
Oh, there's a lot happening. Last year, Suncor, which owns the Petrocan chain of gasoline stations, filling stations, they added charging network to their network of retail, and that was a good move. And then there's a lot going on. I mean, more and more you're seeing, public spaces or private parking lots or residential buildings that are providing that. You see people in my neighborhood where I live in Victoria. There's all kinds of people who've clearly added a charging plug for a car at their home. And if it's a 240 volt, like for your dryer, it's going to charge that car a lot faster than if it was just a household circuit. So people are investing in this, but it's still got a long ways to go. And one of the good things about electric cars is it's not just that there's, a reduction of or elimination of tailpipe emissions, but it's also a really good trend for Canadian mining and exploration. So I think everyone who's in that space right now is starting to, or already woke up to the fact that we're going to need to have metals and minerals to build the electric motors and the battery packs for these cars in future. And if there's going to be 1 billion cars like this, well, that's 1 billion, 300-pound or more battery packs that have to be put together using lithium or the emerging battery solutions of the future. And that's really great for mining because it has to come from somewhere. And not only is it, I think a boost for companies that are developing mines, but let's not forget that Canada is a mining exploration technology center of excellence. And we have some of the top universities and companies and people in this country who can help to deal with the problems. I mean, if we have to scale up mining, more mining in the world for this clean transition, how are we going to deal with problems like acid rock drainage? That's a real problem. It's difficult to solve and it has to be solved. So it's an opportunity for our innovators to be more relevant. And I think that's a good thing. But back to EVs themselves, I think there's some really interesting issues, with how the deployment is. And I would argue that the expectation that I hear from so many today that we're going to kind of flip over and then one day, not in the far distant future, everyone will be driving an EV is a flawed one. And based on what we know today, I think I could not predict that. I don't think it's a safe prediction at all.
What happens with your electric car when it's 8 to 10 years old?
Okay, well, that's one of the big things, Jim, because that's when the battery becomes depleted. And so you have to spend maybe, it's going to vary. I'm not an expert on this, but I've certainly heard one figure cited, $15,000 to get a new battery. Just like with your phone, after a while, it's been charged a few hundred times or a few thousand times. You've got to go into the Apple store and get a new battery. They're getting better and better. The battery in my current iPhone 11, is surprisingly robust and less subject to waning over time like my old one. So I know that's changing. You can't be fixed in your thinking here, but still we're hearing that there's a big expense. So when you hear it say, hey, guess what? I don't have to pay for gasoline anymore like you schmucks. I don't have to pay for a mechanic to maintain that car like you people using your internal combustion engines. I know that's something that, proud new, electric vehicle owners, like to think about or say. And yeah, there's definitely something to that, but let's not forget that there are different high points in the business model for that as a consumer. I mean, you pay a lot more to buy one of the electric vehicles. You also have to anticipate that if you're going to hold on to it for a number of years, you're going to have to redo the battery at some point. And those are not insignificant costs.
Well, perhaps you should save the money that you would have spent on gasoline so that by the time you have to swap out the batteries, you have the cash.
Tuck it away there. I mean, there's a great example. I was looking in the automotive pages of my local paper, Victoria, the Times Colonist, the Chevrolet dealership. They had a car, two versions of it. Basically, they look identical, subcompact. One is the Spark. That's an internal combustion driven car. The other is the Bolt electric vehicle. And this is just last month. This is recent information. If you want to look at the price spread, how real is it? How big is it? Okay, so the manufacturer's suggested retail price on the Spark driven with gasoline is $11,799. The identical looking Bolt electric vehicle manufacturer's price $48,983. So that's 4 times as much as the ICE. That's a big spread. Who would pay that? Why would you pay such a spread for the same identical car that is not going to be able to take you pretty much nonstop on a major road trip? You know, for example, if you drove from Vancouver to Calgary, I just did some rough calculations. You might be using, if you're lucky, $20 or maybe $40 worth of electricity for that Bolt. And if you're driving the Spark, you'd be spending $80 on gas. So, that's a significant difference, spending twice as much, but it's only $80. If you were flying on Air Canada, you'd be paying, $500, $600, $800 for that route. So, pretty economical at that level. And the problem with the electric vehicle still, and this will change over time, is that you have to budget the time to charge it. And if you charge that Bolt on a trip from Vancouver to Calgary, you'd have to stop twice during that trip to fill it up. If you were lucky and found a supercharging station, you might be able to get it filled up in, an hour or two. But if you had to rely on, just a home one, that could take you like 7-8 hours per charge. So you're adding, quite a bit of time to a journey there. And, there's a whole bunch of issues. I mean, I don't want to be the guy, skeptic about EVs or, not looking to embrace a clean future. I don't think it's about that. I think we can have a sort of practical solution-oriented discussion about how do we get to where we want to be. And I think what's going to happen is that we will see cars like that Spark become even more efficient. They'll go further with less gas, and that's a good thing. The idea that we just eliminate all fossil fuels still sounds to me in 2021 as a far-fetched idea. And I know there's probably listeners out there saying, no, you don't understand. Show me the evidence. Right now, the evidence is not there to say that there is this kind of miraculous benefit that we can just simply switch on. It's not there yet.
Do we have the electrical generation capacity to look after everybody's electric car?
Well, if Site C has been such a problematic project to get this far, and as you know, it's hanging in the balance. We have a very important government decision that must be announced soon. I don't care to speculate on what it could be, but imagine how many other projects, if we had to find another Site C to replace the electricity that's meant to come from Site C, how would we do that? Site C, despite its difficulties, was undoubtedly the easiest way to get a very large amount of reliable electricity. And that's needed for not only electrification of the vehicle fleet, but there's also policy move to electrify houses more so that you're putting in heat pumps instead of a gas furnace. A lot of governments are pushing for that, not all, but a lot are at the local level. And again, you do need electricity for that. I have a heat pump at my cottage, don't have it on that often, and I left it on by accident one winter for a month. I got a bill. I wasn't there, but the Nest thermostat thought I was and kept it heated as if there were people in it. I got a bill for like $300 in a cold snap. That thing went through a lot of electricity. Normally I run the fireplace as well as that when I'm there. And so, that's a considerable amount of electricity at 12 cents a kilowatt hour that everyone, and so if the whole world is doing that, where is the power going to come from? And I know there's someone saying, oh, you just get some solar panels. Well, sorry, that just is not going to work where we live. All right, get some wind farms. Well, I remember 20 years ago when Premier, at that time, Gordon Campbell in BC released the Clean Energy Plan, in the early 2000s, and they had maps of where the wind farms would go. They had all the run of river stuff. It was a big vision. First time British Columbians had really heard about that. Well, 20 years later, what's happened in wind? 2 decades have produced a couple of wind farms in the northeast, in the Peace, 2 or 3, I think, in Tumbler Ridge up towards Dawson. There's a lot of wind there, and that's great, but it just hasn't developed that quickly. So back to this question, I mean, how would you replace a Site C, a very large project? Because we're definitely going to need that, and it's not simple. So I do get a little frustrated when I hear, oh, it's so easy, you just need to do, my preferred solution. Well, hang on there. We need to make sure it's going to work.
Now, of course, if you drive an electric vehicle, you're not paying the gasoline road taxes, but the government will need that revenue to be replaced. How long before you have to start paying usage fee for the highways, perhaps tolls, or you have to send in your mileage every year and then be taxed on that?
Well, it's incredibly expensive to maintain the road network, and if you let it deteriorate, if potholes go untended and cracks don't get filled because there's no money for that, pretty soon it is in such bad repair it has to be replaced, and that's why it's so important that you've got these road fixing cycles. Incredibly expensive. That's what our gasoline taxes go towards in part. And if suddenly we don't have that revenue, where does it come from? So at some point it's probably going to be a difficult decision by the government. They're going to say, whenever you register a new car, we don't care what sort of engine it has, you're going to be paying a tax. So electric vehicle owners will have to face it. I mean, at some point in time, suppose that there's 100% EVs. I don't believe we'll ever get there, by the way. I think there'll be hybrids. I think there will be a long-term place for ICE, for heavy transport especially. But suppose that all of that revenue was lost to government. It has to be made up, because we're not going to be driving around on potholed roads. No one would accept that. It would I think when that moment arrives, it'll be something that consumers are not happy with at all.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration, with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Value from success. Growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, what kind of new natural resource development ideas are there?
Well, it's a interesting time of year. It's always January comes around every year, and I get excited about this period of time because it's when a whole bunch of the natural resource industry people get together for some of the big conferences. And there's 3 that I'm looking forward to attending in the next 8-10 weeks, or I guess 3 months, first quarter of the year, starting with Roundup, Mineral Exploration Roundup, which is brought to us every year by the Association of Mineral Exploration of British Columbia, AMEBC. They do this fabulous event. It's like 5,000 people come in non-pandemic years to the Vancouver Convention Center, and they descend on downtown, and they are in all the restaurants and hotels, and it really becomes this mining town for 3-4 days at the end of January. This year, of course, it's not going to be in person. It's going to be virtual, but the Roundup people have done a great job of bringing together their plans for making it the best it can be, to find out what's going on, to network, see your friends. I just love going to the Yukon night there, where the Yukon government has one of the best gatherings, and you meet people who've just almost literally walked in from their claim and didn't change for the event. They look like they just walked out of a pickup truck in Whitehorse and jumped on the plane and got themselves there. I love talking to those people, get to talk to the First Nations and the leaders of Indigenous groups and what they're trying to do. You talk to the political people, the explorers, the speculators, the investors. They're all there. It's just so exciting. That's Roundup, January 18 to 21, and they have an online piece. I'll be signed up there. The other one I look forward to that takes place in BC is the BC Natural Resource Forum. And that's been going now for, I'll bet close to 20 years. And it's held in Prince George every January. This year it'll be January 26th to 28th. And it's become kind of a policy. I called it once, in half joking, the Davos of British Columbia, because you go to this somewhat remote. A lot of people would say Prince George is remote. I know people in Prince George would say, hey, we're a major city, which is true, but it feels like you're in this sort of smaller place. There's over 1,000 policy people company people from big companies and small companies and professional services. And the last few years, it's really picked up momentum. The natural resource minister federally comes up to it. The premier of BC has always been a speaker there, and the relevant ministers from BC are there. So it's great to be able to hear directly from government what some of the plans are on major policies. And then the third one is really the biggest. I think it must be one of the biggest conferences in Canada, period, for anything. It's the PDAC, as some call it, or PDAC, the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, the mining people of Canada. They get over 30,000 people in downtown Toronto for the PDAC every March. This year, March 7th to 10th. And it's great there. You'll see a delegation from Mongolia wearing their traditional costume, walking around. You'll see African delegations. It's exotic. It reminds you, Jim, that Canada is, a lot of Canadians don't even know this, it's one of the foremost mining countries in the world in terms of having, the capital raising functions in Toronto and Vancouver, in terms of having the universities like UBC and McGill that are preeminent mining education centers of excellence. And a lot of research also goes on at those universities because, going back, we were talking about EVs. We need a lot of technological advancements in things like acid rock drainage, in developing the mineral deposits that are most relevant to electric motors and batteries in future. We've got lots of that in Canada. We've also got the expertise in Canada that can go anywhere and does go anywhere in the world to apply Canadian mining knowledge. And so I think that's something that the people who go out to the PDAC know this, but I think it's always a good time of year to remind all Canadians that this is a very significant part of, among other things, the great quality of life we've got, because mining produces a lot of benefits.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, you had a little questionnaire for me, and one of the things on it was, what is Canada's $1.7 trillion a year industry? I know the answer to that, but perhaps you can tell our listeners what it is and why it gets not enough attention nationally.
Well, we're talking about oil and gas, and it's not a one-year thing. That number, $1.9 trillion, new study just came out from the Canadian Energy Centre. That's the value of Canada's oil and gas exports over the last few decades. And if you said, well, what else could we have in our economy that would get us $1.9 trillion, call it $2 trillion in export revenue, what would it be? I don't know. That's a lot of beaver tails to sell. That's a lot of hotel rooms for foreign visitors to come and pay for in foreign currency and leave that behind in our economy. I don't think you could do it with tourism. Certainly couldn't do it with great things like Okanagan apples. You need drivers like oil and gas, and we've got that. So it was quite interesting to see that study. We've seen that, and here's the really astonishing thing, is that $2 million over the time span, 1988 to 2019, was the vast majority of the $2.5 trillion of all Canadian exports over that period. So most of the value of our energy exports came from oil and gas, is what that's telling us. So it's also a growing field. It's grown from 60% of our exports to 82% of our exports, which I think it is a shift where hydroelectricity exports, like the Columbia Basin Treaty, gives us steady income, like they've got in Quebec and Labrador. That's great income to have, selling electricity to those who are connected by a wire to our system, which is the United States. But it's been eclipsed significantly by oil and gas over the past couple of years.
Now, oil and gas, of course, people hold protests and so on, but Canada being, I always thought it was the coldest country in the world, now I'm being told it's only the second coldest. How do you replace that heat? Because electric heat is tremendously expensive, natural gas heat, very affordable.
Yeah, I think the challenge here, what we're seeing in terms of policy development, where are we going? Because obviously there's a decarbonization track where the climate issue can only be addressed by reducing emissions. And oil and gas, apart from the economic wonderfulness of a $2 trillion industry, of course there is the flip side, and how do you manage that? And it's obviously incumbent upon us to do so. So what we're seeing is development of hydrogen, of biofuels, of using captured methane from landfills and agricultural operations, where you collect the gas that comes off that fermentation of or garbage or from manure, and you capture it and you put it into the pipe, so that when you're switching on your gas cooker at home, some of that gas is going to be from those renewable areas. Not all of it right now. There's not enough landfills out there to produce enough gas to replace all the gas we use. But it's certainly maybe 5% right now. It's going to go up to 15%, and there's even some who have higher ambitions. And then also mixing gas into the gas supply that is from other lower carbon sources. Over time, having blue hydrogen that is produced by the input of natural gas, but not combusting it, not burning the fossil fuel to create hydrogen, but really it's a green type of hydrogen that's called blue because it's from natural gas, and having more of that available. So in late 2020, I know the federal government did move forward with a significant commitment to developing the hydrogen economy in Canada. So that's what's going to be happening over time. And again, just like with EVs, I think you need the reality check. Yes, there's plenty of hype out there. Yes, Elon Musk has a $800 billion company. And yes, people love their Teslas, but realistically, we know that costs 4 times as much for the average person, to get into an electric car as opposed to a comparable, non-electric car. So, just as that's true, it's also true, I think, that in the economy, we are likely in future, I think, to have adapted the energy systems we have today rather than simply replace them. We have billions, probably hundreds of billions of dollars worth of pipelines in the ground, local pipelines, pipes right up to your house, from your house to the street, from the street to a grid, from the grid to big mainline gas lines up to the upstream where the gas comes from. That's an incredibly expensive and actually very well regulated and beneficial piece of infrastructure or system of infrastructure. So why would we get rid of it? That would be, I think, a crazy thing to do based on what we know is a very difficult adoption when we can't even get something like Site C built. Do we want to just plunge into the unknown and have no energy in our lives? No one wants that.
Stewart, how can people get more information about the Resource Works Society?
ResourceWorks is moving into more of the national conversation. Our task force on real jobs, real recovery in 2020 was really a high watermark for us. We've been talking with folks in Ottawa recently to share some of the ideas that our 38 member associations and trade unions and First Nations groups and organizations brought together. And to learn about that, you can go to the task force website, realrecovery.ca, and then ResourceWorks itself. We've been around for 8 years now. At resourceworks.com. We're always posting new information in the news feed. Go to the news part of ResourceWorks. You'll see there's all kinds of cool stuff we've got there.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. Find him on Twitter at SJ Muir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at House Street. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.